Rest of the news. Governor Jan Brewer yesterday signed a bill banning public schools from having any ethnic study courses. The aim was mostly at the Tucson Unified School District's Mexican-American Studies Department, which critics called ethnic chauvinism, where they claim it teaches Latino students to believe they're oppressed by white people. Your papers, please. Schools that don't fall into line with the law will have 10% of their state funds slashed every month. Students in Arizona, like all across America, now will continue to intensely study the history of dead white men, from the kings of Europe to the founding fathers and presidents of America, but the histories of people oppressed because of their color, race, or religion will continue to be ignored in this ongoing war against all cultures that aren't white and European. While white European ancestry Republican men and women like Governor Jan Brewer need an education themselves about the histories of the peoples and civilizations that were on this continent before Europeans invaded, and about the centuries of struggle that took place between those cultures and continue to this day in independence movements and anti-big oil movements across Central and South America, not much is going to happen by way of educating kids in Arizona to this regard. On the Senate floor, Senator Byron Dorgan of North Dakota lashed out at his own party for the financial reform bill, saying that if they don't fix the too-big-to-fail provisions and better regulate credit default swaps, then, quote, shame on us. Dorgan said, we have responsibility here. We cannot claim ever that we have done something about this system, end quote. Senator Dorgan of North Dakota is offering an amendment to ban naked credit default swaps, a practice that for centuries was illegal and is now being used to destroy the American economy, and, as we speak, to attack the country of Greece, while making a few cool billion for a handful of hedge fund managers who then, because of the Bush tax cuts, pay a maximum 15% income tax and no Social Security tax on the money they take. Senator Dorgan's problem is that because of a series of very, very toxic Supreme Court decisions going back a century, but particularly over the past 4 decades, corporations now own nearly every member of Congress except those from small states like Dorgan's North Dakota or Bernie Sanders' Vermont, where it's still possible to run for office inexpensively. You know, the UK just had an election and not one single TV ad was allowed to be run in the campaign. Every single vote was recorded on paper, not a single Diebold machine. We have a long way to go to reclaim democracy here in America. Let's get started. The international police agency Interpol has placed the former chief executive of collapsed Icelandic bank Kaupthing on its wanted list on charges of forgery and fraud. Also on Wednesday, another failed Icelandic bank filed a $2 billion lawsuit in New York court against former large shareholders and executives, against individuals, for alleged fraud for unlawfully draining more than $2 billion out of that bank. Interesting ideas. Lawsuits? Jail terms? For banksters? Coming to a courtroom in jail near you soon? Don't hold your breath, but we can hope. And here's a good sign. In New York, Attorney General Andrew Cuomo has started an investigation of 8 banks to determine whether they provided misleading information to rating agencies in order to inflate the grades of certain mortgage securities. Cuomo's investigation includes mega banks such as Bank of America and Goldman Sachs. Hopefully his investigation, or somebody's investigation, can reach back to 1999 and 2000 and illuminate and maybe prosecute the role of former Enron director Wendy Graham and her husband, former Senator and John McCain chief economic advisor Phil Graham, in slipping through Congress the 2 pieces of legislation that allowed the banksters to engage in all this destructive activity that would just a decade ago have earned them a long term in jail. When workers rescued from the BP oil rig that exploded came ashore last month, officials from drilling rig owner and operator Transocean apparently had them sign forms stating that they had not been injured and that they had no first-hand knowledge of what happened. Lawyers for the workers say this is a common industry practice, so that later down the road, when everybody realizes how big the disaster is, Transocean and BP and Halliburton's lawyers can either challenge the workers' credibility or even prevent them from testifying in future legal proceedings. Some workers are now saying that they were coerced, a charge that Transocean denies. Sounds similar to reports that BP accidentally asked Alabama fishermen to sign a no-sue contract in exchange for $5,000. course, according to a new report published by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, solar power may provide almost a quarter of the world's electricity supplies by 2050. Good news. And in strange news, being behind bars won't stop a group of Indian prisoners from joining the global workforce. Prisoners are joining the outsourcing boom as an information technology company put their working conditions at the Charlapalli Central Jail. Somewhat different than the usual office. By the way, they're going to be handling your bank records. And that's the way it is today, Thursday, May 12th.